The cool cools. It is over and the deal has been done. But is it really? Prigozhin halts his Wagner advance in order to turn them around, seemingly for now. Although his forces were only 120 miles from Moscow, Prigozhin declared that he had ordered them to turn back to save shedding Russian blood. Of course, this comes after the Wagner group did draw first blood, which makes the Russian military and Putin look weak and may invite further future insurrections. Putin had fled Moscow for his bunker, and the deal with Prigozhin seems to prove that he had his hands full with this insurrection. So all this is likely to make Putin more paranoid, which could further destabilize the war with Ukraine and even draw NATO in. Based on Putin's speech that he gave earlier about this, he is likely to double down on this war. And he also showed no signs of the rumored sicknesses. He looked pretty strong and pretty resolute. But there are articles that suggest that NATO was already aware of this. I'll show these maybe later tonight. Is this why our B-52s are put in the air? Is this why our senators, Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham, came out with a bill evoking Article 5 of NATO's treaty should radiation be detected in NATO nations? Protesters in Russia tonight are shouting, Wagner, Wagner, Wagner. So for Putin's sake, he has now martial law as a tool to prosecute the war, maybe to deal with folks like that. I don't know. Yet who knows? Now that Moscow has breathed a sigh of relief and let their guard down a little bit, maybe, just maybe, Wagner Group will surprise them with a surprise invasion of Moscow into the night. Who knows? We just don't know where this is heading yet. I kind of doubt that, though. But, yeah, we'll discuss more of this toward the end of the video. And then we'll discuss what does all this mean. But for now, we're going to look at the details of just what went down. The change of heart after the statement from the office of the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, claiming that Prigozhin and Lukashenko had reached an agreement. So that's when this change of heart came. See, according to Lukashenko's government, Prigozhin considered to halt the advance in exchange for a proposed settlement that included security guarantees for the Wagner forces, and of course, him going to Belarus. So this agreement supposedly keeps his forces from getting prosecuted and also drops the prosecutions on Prigozhin. So as part of the compromise to ease tensions surrounding the insurrection, Prigozhin will relocate to Belarus, as I said, and the criminal prosecutions against him will be dismissed, according to sources from the Kremlin, which was announced this Saturday, which is still Saturday here. According to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov and Yevgeny Prigozhin's men who participated in the bill won't be prosecuted. So you're hearing this both from, the Lukashenko who negotiated the deal and also from the Kremlin. So following this agreement, Prigozhin declared that he was directing his troops to turn back and retire to field camps in Ukraine, where they'd been fighting alongside Russian forces, and stop their march on Moscow. It is not clear if they will remain in the Wagner group or be integrated into the Russian army. And therein lies a lot of big questions. How is this to be accomplished? What kind of tensions will there be between these two groups? So we'll talk about that more in a bit. So top Russian officials and MPs have spoken out in support of Putin, declaring Prigozhin and pleading, denouncing Prigozhin and pleading with him to recant his speeches that he did on TV, in which he really ran down Russia, the war, and the Russian military, the Russian government. He really did some damage to them on the television. Anyway, Razman Kadyrov, Putin's powerful leader, the one he pretty much handpicked in Chechnya, who had previously sided with Prigozhin on some of the criticisms early on of the Russian military, likewise declared his support for Putin's every word, as you can expect he would have. He actually was rushing his forces to try to intercept the Wagner group and take them on directly. So they were going for Rostov-on-Don and then trying to chase them down. That may be part of what convinced Prigozhin to surrender that, and maybe looking at defenses in Moscow. Well, I say surrender, not exactly surrender, but you know what I mean. Anyway, according to Putin, the uprising occurred while Russia was fighting the toughest battle of its future as the West imposed harsh sanctions on Moscow and armed Ukraine. Of course, this toughest battle for its future was the special operation in Ukraine, as you might figure. Moscow had set up checkpoints and armored vehicles. They went into lockdown, and troops on the city's southern outskirts in preparation for the entrance of forces from the Wagner group. And they had been fighting alongside the Wagner group with Russian troops in Ukraine, but now they were heading to Moscow. The Moscow mayor ordered closure of Red Square and advised drivers to avoid certain areas. Putin had threatened severe repercussions to anyone behind the violent insurrection spearheaded by his former protege, who pulled out his men from Ukraine and took control of a crucial military site in southern Russia and moved closer to Moscow. Of course, that being the Southern Military Command Center in Rostov-on-Don, which they seized without a shot, apparently. So what Prigozhin may have received from Putin in terms of concessions, if any, are not immediately apparent. So there may be more to this negotiation than what we realize. There may be other terms. And some people think that maybe Putin may have agreed to some of his terms to remove certain military personnel, such as Shogu. So, but I kind of doubt that. If Putin agreed to Shogu's removal, which I say seems doubtful, Prigozhin would come out on top of the deal with a severe blow to Putin's power. Now, you really think that's going to happen? Putin might grant Prigozhin with more lucrative government contracts, similar to those which it made his fortune in earlier in the restaurant business and so forth, if he estimates, if he eliminates the demand as a counter offer, demand for like removing certain military personnel. It's more likely that Prigozhin relented on the basis of his retreat to Belarus and on having his men cleared. So, hey, give me clearance, get us out of this legal situation you put us in. But it would be extremely difficult and politically unwise for Putin to retract his accusations of Prigozhin's treachery. So how's he to manage that? According to some analysts, Prigozhin might give in by bringing the Wagner group under federal control in Russia's army, or by moving the forces' operations back to Africa, where the mercenaries have been recently active. And you'd think that's going to happen. I think they need them in Ukraine, so I kind of doubt that. Anyway, early on Saturday, the Military Command Center in Rostov-on-Don that oversees Russia's activities in Ukraine was under the hand of Prigozhin's private army. So I guess it goes back, but what happens to these guys who gave in without a shot? Sergei Sobyanin, the mayor of Moscow, issued a warning. Some of the city may have traffic restrictions. Yeah, they locked the city down. But he's proclaiming Monday of some kind of a holiday for the majority of the Russian citizens. Now, what does this all mean, guys? I mean, this is kind of a funny business here, where you've had a coup. The man rushes right up to Moscow, gets 120 miles away, and says, okay, game over. Well, apparently he was in communication with a lot of people, including Lukashenko. And Lukashenko, who's also close to Putin, as was Prigozhin prior to that, negotiated this deal and gave a refuge to Prigozhin outside of Russia, which might have been perilous for him at this point in time. But Russia, but you got to remember, Prigozhin is still very popular in Russia. And that's why the people are in the streets tonight shouting, Wagner, Wagner, Wagner. So what does this mean? The fact that also the reports that there were a lot of Russian troops who were kind of leaving their command with intention to join with the Wagner group. That's one of the other reports I've seen. So I think this has done some damage to the Russian military in terms of the way they look, their strength. So this might invite insurrection from other areas. There are insurrectionists in Chechnya still. You might remember that early on in Putin's rule, his major challenge was a Chechen rebellion. He put it down brutally. And that's why Kadyrov's in charge now, because Kadyrov is pro-Russian. He maintains rule over those people, but there are still insurrectionists there that hate Kadyrov. They would like to overthrow him, and there's a fair number of them. And if they saw an opportunity, they would be likely to go for it. There is also some other oblasts right there next to Chechnya, you might say uh, owned republics or Russian-run republics, actually, that are Muslim, but not so happy with Kadyrov also. So there may be some interplay to support the insurrectionist movements there. A lot of Russia, and especially in Siberia, is comprised of peoples that they're not Russian. They would like to be independent, some of them, but they know they don't have, or at least they think they don't have the might to stand up to Russia. They might if they saw that Russia was so bogged down in Ukraine, and now that the military looks kind of weak, and that somebody just ran up to Moscow and quit at the border, that like Prigozhin did, maybe they would be inclined to push for their independence more, which could unravel the Russian Republic. If that happened, the Russian Federation, I should say, if that should happen, that could mean that there would be a lot of nukes and a whole lot of republics, which would be a nightmare for a lot of the world. The West would be all in a tizzy over it, because suddenly, how do you manage it? Suddenly you got a whole lot of new nuclear states. So that is something. The breakup of Russia is something that Western minds have been worried about a lot over this, because what do you do then? How do you manage that? How would they align themselves? Some of them would maybe align with China. Uh, some of them would want to be independent. Some might still be associated in some fashion with Russia. They may some align with the West. It could be a hodgepodge. Certainly, our agencies would be in there trying to flip them to the West side as much as possible, but it's a big unknown. It's like a game of pickup sticks or 52 card pickup where everything's thrown out. What happens next? You don't want that in a nuclear world, because that also means that some of these countries might cut deals and sell some of their assets to less desirable entities, maybe the Taliban, maybe other groups that aren't so favorable to us here in the West. So this opens up the venue for turmoil, loose nukes. Who knows? Somebody that just hates America might put one of these on a balloon and float it up, like I've mentioned in my previous videos on that topic. So this is not a safe thing. Overall, though, what I really expect is that Russian forces, the Kremlin, Putin, are just going to be more paranoid, and it's going to make them edgier. That they're going to continue. I think Putin, his fate relies on this war in Ukraine. If he loses it, history has shown that when a Russian leader loses a war, their days are pretty much over. So I don't see him backing down. I see him doubling down. And given the speech he gave, I think that's pretty apparent. So the Putin is going to be out there forcing and staying on top of this, and he's going to use his new tools of martial law to make that happen. But it might unravel. It could unravel even in Moscow. Even if Wagner pulls out, there could still be so much discontent that the Russian Federation could fall apart, starting right in Moscow, where the crowds are out there. They're not protesting Wagner, Wagner, Wagner. So there's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of people who are just, well, they were cheering Prigozhin. Like I said, Prigozhin identified himself with the little man in Russia. A lot of them identified with that. A lot of them like that. So it could also be that maybe, as so many times a leader goes into exile, they go to another country, and then they return as the ruler of the country, as the Ayatollah Khomeini, exiled to France. But when the Shah was imperiled and his followers overthrew the Shah, he came back and ran the country. This has happened many times in the past. The leader goes into exile, and then they return triumphantly to rule a place. And maybe that's what Prigozhin's setting up. Now, how did all this happen? Was this instigated by the West? Was Prigozhin in a pocket? Did he kind of side or negotiate with Zelensky, NATO forces, U.S., and did he instigate all this to create a weakness in Russia that would favor them, but do so in a light manner so that he could still look like a patriot and maybe return triumphantly one day to Russia? Or was he actually acting on the behalf of Putin? Maybe Putin wanted to flesh out the weak spots in his country. Maybe he already knew there was a lot of weakness within his government, within his military, and this enabled him to see who was with him and who wasn't. And that's a fact. They do now know who stands with them and who doesn't, far more than they did in the past. So this may give Putin a stronger hand. And it probably does now, if nothing, whether that was intentional or not, he knows who's with him and who's not. Also, the Southern Command is prosecuting the war in Ukraine that they surrendered without a shot. Was this because Putin ordered them to? Or was it because they just kind of sided with Prigozhin? Or maybe they just got caught off guard? Sometimes in your headquarters, you don't really have military security. You look at the military bases in the United States. What's their security? Chain link fence, a little barbed wire around the top, and some guard gates with little pea shooters on their hip to chip badges when people come in and out. That's all most of our bases have. That's why I worry about our bases in the Southwest. Should those highly armed drug cartels decide to race across, maybe after an EMP or other civil unrest here in this country, and seize some of our military bases, just like the Taliban, who weren't as well equipped or as well trained as is the Mexican cartels today. I'll tell you, those Mexican cartels, I think, pose a potential threat to the United States security because of that. So that's a whole nother story. I'll have to talk about that more in the future. So where's all this go from here? Frankly, it's hard to say because there is so much propaganda and fog in the war that it's hard to know, was Prigozhin entirely an independent agent? Did he just come up with all this on his own? Or was he playing for somebody else, be it the West or Putin? You'd think it wouldn't be Putin almost, just because it seemed to weaken Putin's hand. Seemed to, but did it really? Did it really? Maybe things were already in such a bad shape that there was already so much unrest in Russia that Putin needed this. Right now, it's still hard to say. I'm not going to come down on either side, and I'm not taking sides in any of this. So I'm just putting it out there. And the reason I'm putting it out there to you is because if Putin gets more hardcore on it, he might be more likely, especially if his forces aren't doing well in Ukraine, to go nuclear. His existence probably relies on the outcome of the war. The same for the top military brass in Russia. So when the top military brass, who's been called decrepit and corrupt, along with the Kremlin brass and Putin, have their future at stake, their very lives, the idea that they wouldn't resort to tactical nukes might be a stretch. The fact that we had B-52s in the air yesterday. I've had some people comment, and where I posted that video on some other groups in Facebook. Oh, BS is what they said. Oh no, I got eyewitness reports of those things flying from multiple people, and reports came in even after I did that video. They were seen launching on radar. There's those websites you can go to and look at the radar, and they were seen launching, and they were seen turning their transponders off. They flew low over most of the United States, so many people wouldn't see them. They climbed altitude as they went to the coast. Did they just go to the coast and just fly around in circles a little bit, come home? Maybe. We don't know where they could have gone. They could have went anywhere in the world. Maybe they were worried about North Korea, maybe China, maybe there's something going on in the South China Sea, or maybe it was this. We don't know. But I also had reports the night before that the crews of the Minot missile base were running and fetching all over the place. They were in kind of almost a panic mode. They were really high stepping, a lot of busy activity. And observers said they'd never seen anything like that before. So what does all it mean? It means that you better be prepped. You better prepare, guys, because we don't quite yet know what's coming at us. We don't know how all this is going to play out, especially given the way we've raised the ante, the way we've raised the stakes with what Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham are pushing for with NATO. And again, it begs the question, why are we there in the first place? I think that's an ultimate question. Why are we there in the first place? Yeah. So guys, we are putting our homeland here at risk over there. And we got so much of our attention over there, we're depleting our munitions, and we're not prepared to take on a bigger country that may be a far greater challenge to us than any nation's ever been before, far more than Russia or the old Soviet Union. And that is that China is today run by the CCP. It's not a ding on China. There's a lot of good people there. good people in every nation, every race, color, and creed. But the CCP has definitely put a challenge on the United States. It's going to be the biggest challenge we've ever faced, far bigger than this. But our eyes are so focused over there, are we in trouble over here? And we need to balance that in some fashion. We got to figure out how to deal with that. And we're doing a really poor job of it right now because we're totally focused on this area. Why is that? For Europe, why? Europe's got more people and more deeper pockets than we've got. Collectively, got a bigger gross national product or gross continental product, if you will, since it's different nations under the EU. So theoretically, but anyway, enough said, guys. Bottom line is peerless times are still here. This Wagner incursion has not made that any better. It may have made it worse in that it may give Putin a stronger hand, but it also may make him more paranoid. And certainly, especially if he's worried about his own country dissolving, if he don't move forward fast. So I think he's going to be more resolute to push this thing in Ukraine and maybe push it faster. Well, we got a big meeting of NATO coming up in July in Vilnius, so Lithuania. So we'll see what comes of that. I think that will be the turning point. Whatever they decide may decide the fate of all this thing that's coming down. We'll see how Russia reacts. So prep, get ready, and check out my Patriot Supply. Go to prepwithgreg.com to do that. Go to prepwithgreg.com. Good deals on long-term food storage that last 25 years, 2,000 calories a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And also check out my seed links, guys. But when you go to my Patriot Supply, click their logo. When you go to prepwithgreg.com, click that logo and go in and see the other prepping supplies, water filtration, and stuff like that. The guy. Anyway, just check my links below. If you see something that makes sense to you, look at it. Otherwise, if you like this content, subscribe to my channel, bang the notification bell, and click all. And double check back because the platform likes to unsubscribe people, and sometimes they just don't send notifications out. So check my channel out frequently and see what I got new. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope everyone has a blessed weekend. And with that, I'm going to say, Greg out.